From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. Scoop Fest is over, our friends have all gone home, and like Vegemite on sushi, it just doesn't feel right. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
You know, I'm going to be honest. The Vegemite on sushi was a bad idea.
No shit.
Yeah, you know what? It was a bad idea. Hindsight's 2020, but I felt like, you know what? I wanted to make a statement. I wanted to
you definitely made a statement.
It hurt. It hurt everything.
I don't think it was the statement you wanted to make.
Vegemite's bad by itself. Okay, Vegemite's bad when you use as prescribed, and putting it on sushi was a bad choice. But also the soy sauce didn't help either. So I think that all those components together was pretty bad. But some listeners are like, what the heck are they talking about? You've heard for months now that we've been talking about getting together with all of our fans for sushi, sake, and psychology.
Yes.
That happened.
We
did it. It was awesome.
We had an amazing turnout. We had more than we anticipated.
Yeah, I didn't know that many people even listened to the show, let alone show up at sushi.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
It was great because, I got there first because you were in some traffic, and so I get there, and it's about, probably 15 minutes before we said, we'd kind of get started. And as I'm driving by, I see this crowd of people in front of sushi, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking, no, that can't be for us. It's a tour bus. Like, a tour bus probably dropped off a bunch of people. That's very common in Las Vegas. They're getting their sushi on. And so, I park my car, and then as I'm walking up, I start noticing that people are wearing, Ice Cream Social stuff, which obviously they're in town for Scoop Fest. And I realized, oh my God, I think that's our people. And dude, that was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Somebody turns around, and they recognized me. Random guy who has a podcast. I've never been recognized in my life for being in any way famous. And the whole group of 30 people turns around and starts cheering, goes, Jim! And I was like, yes! I felt like I was walking into a Greek wedding. It was very exciting.
Well, when I finally got there was probably 25 people there at that time.
It was piling up.
It was overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Because I saw the crowd too when I parked, and then I had to kind of wait in my car for a few seconds and kind of
get your breath. Okay, psych yourself up. It's gonna be okay.
There was a moment there I thought about just bailing,
and just leaving me.
Jim's got it. He's fine. I'm an introvert naturally, so it's difficult for me to go into situations like that. But it was fun. I had a blast. Fun.
Oh my gosh! And so we got everybody in the front and said hi to everybody, shook hands, and what I loved is that it was a big group, but it was small enough that we could meet each person. So we got every single person's name, and it was so much fun because we're like, oh, you're on Twitter, you said this, or you're a Patreon or whatever, and that was so much fun to figure out where are you from, what's your story, and so everybody was chatting, and we kind of got to know every single person, and that was so much fun. And then we took a group picture, and then more people actually showed up after that. Right. It's funny because all the people that showed up after that had the coolest hair. Like Scoop Chernot, had that yellow hair, and 3 Scoops a lady showed up, and she had hair that was dyed. So all the people that had cool hair, they were not in our picture, but it was fun, man. That was a lot of fun. And then we went into Goemon. We got the private room. Thank you for setting that up. But we flooded that place. There were not enough chairs, so they keep bringing in chairs like it's a closet.
They don't take reservations, so I contacted the manager to kind of.
I'm glad you did because, dude, there was a lunch rush. It was pretty full in there.
Yeah, it was, and. I kind of let him know, hey, I know you don't do reservations, but I just want to let you know.
This is happening.
This is happening.
We're coming whether you like it or not.
We can't stop this thing at this point. It's going to happen.
This train is coming.
Yeah.
It's too big.
And so then, he was going to oh, okay, sure, I'll bring in some extra people. And he was like, well, text me the day before and let me know for sure whether or not this is still on. And I'm like, there are people from Australia who are going to be there.
Yeah, it's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
But that's fine. If you want me to do that, I'll text you and let you know that this thing that we already know is happening is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
But
yeah, confirmed it. I'm glad it was set aside.
I didn't get a chance to talk to them afterwards, but I'm sure it
turned out. No, they kept up with us. I mean, I was pretty impressed. They did a really good job. And it was fun. I mean, we were all packed in there. Everybody got to kind of chat and hang out. People like this is classic. Like, we have such awesome fans. These people have turned out to be just so wonderful, and just the kind of people that, you know, encourage others and listen to others, and also are really enthusiastic about what we're doing. Like, we got a lot of pats on the back, people just saying, "Hey man, thank you for doing the show. Like, it's meaningful. Keep at it." You know, like, you don't realize that it's helping. And people gave us fan art. We got that awesome cartoon picture of us. That was so cool. I took a picture, put it up on the Twitter and the Instagram. We got those cool, cute souvenirs from Australia. That was so much fun. My daughter stole mine. As soon as I got home, I got a kangaroo. I named it Mandy Roo because Mandy's the one that gave it to me. So I taught my daughter, like, here's Mandy Roo. And so now she carries it around. She tells me it's Mandy Roo. Did you name your koala?
No.
Okay.
I didn't think to do that.
Well, you know, you should.
Yeah.
Did you give it to your dogs?
No. No, it's in my office. It's up on my shelf.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then she also gave us Vegemite, which is what I decided, you know what? The Vegemite's here. I got sushi. Let's do this.
So there's about 30 people in the room at that time, and 29 of them were vocal in saying that's a bad idea.
Don't do this. And I was like, no, I've got it. And it was a terrible idea. So I spread it all over. I think it was like a 007 roll. And I dipped it in soy sauce, and I went ahead and hit that. And somebody had the good presence of mind to film the whole thing. And so there's actually great pictures of this that ended up out there on the internet somewhere of me just cringing and wanting to puke it up. But I finished it, okay? If I could eat your stupid Spam roll, I can eat the Vegemite roll.
Spam rolls.
It is not that far off, to be honest with you. It had the same salty kind of texture to it. It was not good.
It's the hot dog of sushi.
It is. So that was a lot of fun. Thank you to everybody who came out. And what was really great is, you know, here we are just enjoying time with these guys and getting to know everybody, hearing their stories. And then we got to spend 3 days with them at Scoop Fest, which Scoop Fest, you've heard us talk about it on the show. It's a live 3-day event in Las Vegas that's centered around a very popular podcast, Ice Cream Social. Also our landlords. We are in their studio here in Las Vegas, and Jacob's over here with us. And,
oh yeah.
And it's an awesome thing. And Penn Jillette was there with his show. Piff the Magic Dragon was there. Other great podcasts. Comedian and magician Mac King came down and did this whole live thing, and it was so much fun. It was 3 days, deep into the night, here in Las Vegas. So 200 people. It was wild.
So this being your first Scoop Fest.
Yeah.
What was the thing that you think surprised you the most?
I think I was most surprised by how everybody seemed to know each other. Because it's like 200 people. Like, I mean, you are wall-to-wall humanity. And when you see that crowd, the first time I walked in and I saw how many people were there, because I thought there was a lot of people at our sushi thing. No. Like, when you walk into the big room and everybody's there, you go, oh my gosh, like, this is hundreds of people. And it was packed in, and I thought, oh my gosh, like, this is a lot of people. And everybody seemed to have stories with each other, know each other from online. It was really neat that it was a community of people. And that was something that really stuck to me, is how, like, actually authentic and friendly the atmosphere was. But that did not stop me from getting nervous, because we got to perform live at Scoop Fest on the third day of it. We were up before Penn Jillette and Piff the Magic Dragon, a big day, and we got to do our live show, which we've been worried about for months, wondering how this was going to go, fearful that people were not going to ask live questions that we were going to have to read on air, and not sure what to do. What was that like for you whenever we were upstairs? We got some good pictures of the pregame up in the green room. Laura, your girlfriend, was snapping pictures of us as we're like staring at things. I taped us walking down the stairs as Paul was announcing us. But, you know, what was that like?
I was not nervous at all. No. Up until that morning. And then that's when I was really kind of, flustered, not really sure what was going on, and not sure how it was going to go. But once we got into it, I think that was probably our best show. And the reason why I would say that is because we had a back and forth dialogue.
God, what a difference that was.
Oh yeah,
we had probably 5 people, and there was a line. We had to cut them off,
and that's our comfort zone.
Right, that's so natural to just be able to ask follow-up questions, and you know, it felt much more like what we do. And that was, you're right, that ended up being really, really natural. I ended up feeling nervous. I'll tell you when I felt nervous. On day 1. So the opening day, the very first show of all of Scoop Fest was, of course, the headline, Ice Cream Social. Sure. So they're up there. They have comedian Matt King. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, this room is packed. Everybody's cheering. There was a lot going on. And that's when I realized this is way bigger than I am prepared for. Like, I do not want to be the guy up on that stage. And then when we went, though, thank goodness we went on the third day. So by then, I think we had a lot of opportunities to see how a lot of other podcasts did it. And I felt like, okay, I feel like I know this crowd now. And by then, I felt like I knew everybody.
Yeah.
There wasn't a person who asked a question who I had not already had a conversation with.
Right.
You know, and what was really cool is after our show, because we didn't get to everybody in line, we stuck around, had a great night, you know, watched Penn, watched Piff. There was a costume ball at the end, and everybody's, you know, dressed up in costumes, and there was a dance, and there was live musicians. It was so much fun. But the whole time we were here, people were still pulling us aside and going, hey, man, do you have 5 minutes? Like, I just want to check on something and just talk to you more. And so we ended up having tons more conversations about people's, like, real stuff, you know, and it was so cool just to be there and really get to know the audience and get to, like, talk to fans one-on-one, which is what I hope our Patreon community becomes. Like, I hope over time it becomes a place where there's, you know, live conversation and dialogue and chatting and just more of that one-to-one interaction. But, man, that was so wild. But, yeah, I was nervous as hell that morning.
Yeah.
And luckily you texted me. No, you called me because I thought that we didn't go on until, like, 2:30 or 3. And I put it out there on the internet, and you were like, you saw it. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? Get down here right now. I'm like, what? What are you talking about, man? I mean, lunch.
It all worked out.
Yeah, I had no idea. So then I flew down, and luckily we made it. But so much fun. Thank you to everybody that was there with us live. What a cool 3 days, man. I mean, so awesome. And then the after effect of this has been really cool because we met so many people. And so many people joined our Patreon. And so now at the end of the show today, we get to announce all these new people that have joined us and, you know, are supporting this movement, trying to help us, you know, reach folks and help them where we can. And it's just so awesome, man. What a cool community that is, you know, exists. And we are not even a year old yet, Nick. Do you realize that? This podcast has only been in existence for barely 10 months.
Right.
And it's only been good for, I think, a week.
Maybe.
I mean, this is it. This is where we turn it around. This episode.
If we round up.
If we round up.
Yeah, it was the thing that I really liked about, for any of you who haven't attended this Scoop Fest before and are thinking about it but worried, because I was talking about this in the pre-show. I'm a very introverted person. I don't go out of my way to draw attention to myself.
Right.
And that was always something that was difficult for me going into big groups of people. But one thing that is just really surprising, anytime that there's a large group of people, there's always going to be a small group, just a few people that are just always going to be assholes.
Right.
Like when,
no matter who.
When the Golden Knights went to the Stanley Cup Finals, one of the games that was in Washington, my friend, myself, and my girlfriend Laura went down to Toshiba Plaza to the watch party, right? To watch the game, and we are surrounded by thousands of Golden Knights fans, and we're all on the same team. We're all rooting for the same people, but there were almost 3 fights that broke out
even though audience. They're all the same folks.
Yes, and it's
That's
just because
funny.
people are just being assholes.
Right.
But the cool thing about the community that you guys built, Jacob, is that you go there and there isn't a single person that I met that I was even kind of like, I don't like I don't really care for that person.
No, everybody's so nice.
Everybody was awesome.
Scoops are good people.
Yeah.
Scoops are good people.
I don't know how you guys created a fan base like that, but it's just
awesome.
Really amazing.
I think it's just a lot of good people just trying to help us 3 assholes.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's what it really is.
That's what it is.
Yeah, there we go.
How can we get these guys to just, you know, not be assholes?
Yeah.
If enough good people surround. I imagine that must be what it's like to live in Canada, Nick. You get there and just like, everybody's really nice.
Everybody was really welcoming, and it was just really cool.
It was a lot of fun and super nerve-wracking, but, you know, luckily we got to meet people before we did it, and we had our live show, and that was powerful to see this huge room filled with people. And I thought, man, they're going to be so bored. And it was not. I think that people really enjoyed it. They were dialed into the conversation. Lots of people had stories to tell. And it really underscores and highlights how mental health affects all of us. How this is a conversation that not one person looks at and goes, that's not relevant to my life.
Right.
It's relevant.
Exactly.
It's relevant in some way, shape, or form. Either you love somebody or you yourself. We all go through life. And you might not have a label or a diagnosis, but there's stuff happening.
Yes, and somebody, who was it that asked the question about So ask the question about like what level, like.
Yeah,
I got some.
And your advice was
problems,
there's nothing
but
too small.
There's nothing too small, and I think that was the perfect question to ask at Scoop Fest because I think it really kind of sent the message to everybody, kind of like, oh, yeah, like it's never going to be a bad thing to ask for advice or ask for help.
What I loved about it was after our performance and after the day kind of kept going and, you know, some of the big shows happened, that night there's a food truck out there, and I would just be out there hanging out by the food truck, and people just kept finding their way to me and going, so listen, here's my stuff, you know, and listening to this person up on stage talk about their truth kind of gives me the power to talk about it myself. And then there would be this like little crowd that would kind of form around that about, you know, here I am talking to one person, like another person kind of clumps in, another person, and then we're all just listening to people talk about their history with mental health and what they've survived and what they're going through. And I'm not even saying anything. They're not asking for my advice. We're just talking about them. And there's a crowd of people that are listening to it. And I thought, wow, that's special. That like this is honest. The only place I've ever seen that is in therapy, you know, in group therapy. And so cool, man. And you know, what a milestone to get to do it. It was wild. It was fun. It was engaging. And man, I can't wait to do something like that again. You know, like that's
it was a blast.
It was a
good
blast.
Time.
It was
really
so much fun. But Nick, I thought you did very well. I thought you did a really good job. It's funny when you listen to the recording because you don't know because you can't see us, but there's a lot going on visually that you can't see. Like, I keep trying to adjust your mic, and you're like, stop it.
God, that irritated the shit out of me. Don't ever do that again.
That was so fun. Because I was like, I didn't want him to be on the tape. Like, I was worried that he couldn't hear you. But whatever. Next time I'm just going to reach up and like brush hair out of your face too. Like, and I'll like lick my thumb and wipe a smudge off. Like, hey, just got a little bit of schmutz. Let me just get that for you.
And that will be the end of Pod Therapy.
And that'll be the end of
That's how it's going to go down.
That's how we came to an end.
But thank you everybody for showing up. We really appreciate it. And sorry for taking up so much time in today's podcast.
Yeah,
but we just wanted to make sure that we
so much fun.
And thanked everybody, and thank you for showing up and support.
And if you have a podcast festival happening in your hometown, invite us. Maybe we'll show up.
Yes.
As long as it's in Vegas and it's down the street from our house.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will discuss how to avoid being a grump. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsor is Jake Schneider. Jake, you are awesome, and we super respect that you support this show and somehow added exactly 1 penny to your Theraproducer number to become our largest Patreon donor.
Majority shareholder.
Majority shareholder. We also saw Jake this weekend at Scoop Fest and at Sushi. It was awesome hanging with you and with Judy. We can't wait to catch you next time that you're in town, and thank you so much for caring about what we do. If you'd like to join the party and help us make this show possible and tap into special content for patrons only, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our next question is about how to avoid being a grump.
How to avoid being a grump. Hey guys, I'm loving the show, and I finally came upon something in my life that I think you might be able to talk about. In recent days, I've been feeling very grumpy, and I've been rude to a few of my friends because of it. As I'm having conversations with them, I can feel myself saying things in a snarky way or being too judgmental. Obviously, I don't like being this way, and I want to find a way to avoid this terrible case of the grumps. I love my friends, and they deserve to have a kinder me. For context, I'm a college senior. I suspect nervousness about the future and an imperfect sleep schedule might be contributing to my current mood. Or maybe this is just what being an adult is like. Do you two have any suggestions for dealing with those days when you just seem frustrated and grumpy with everything? Thanks for all you do, Reverend Scoop Kevin.
I love that the implication is maybe this is just what it is to be an adult. Maybe you're just unhappy and you take that out on everybody. And this is the rest of my life. I don't think so, Kevin. But that's sad that you think that.
I don't know. That's not too far off from the truth.
I hope to God it is.
Well, it just depends on what your view of adulthood was going to be like. Right? I mean, if you thought adulthood was going to be
true,
you know, I can't be disappointed that I'm not playing in the major leagues.
Right.
Like, that was my thought as a child.
Right. So
I'm
it
going to
depends on how you kind of score it. It's funny because
how you adjust to reality.
When I read that letter for the first time, he gets to this point where he says, to put it in context, here's who I am. I was just holding my breath, hoping it said, to put in context, I live with 7 other people in a cottage in the forest, and there's this princess who recently came by. She bit into this apple. She fell asleep. It's really weird. And my friends are Happy, Sleepy, Doc, and the rest of them, and Bashful. Do you get this reference, Nick?
I'm sorry, I stopped listening.
Ah, damn it. He's Grumpy, the dwarf from the 7 Dwarfs.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, whatever. See, this is why it's hard to be your friend.
This is it?
I feel like you don't affirm me, man. I'm putting stuff out in the universe. All right, so Mr. Grump, Kevin. So I think that thank you for writing in, and this is a really good question because I think we all find ourselves in this. I think that there's seasons of time where we suddenly just notice that we're sort of not happy, but also the way we're treating other people. And that can be really invisible to us, right? Like, it's almost like having spinach in your teeth sometimes. Like, it isn't until somebody else calls you on it or reacts to it and says, hey, are you okay? You know, like, is everything, are we good? And you're like, yeah, no, we're fine. I'm not angry at you. And the other person's like, okay, because you're really giving me that vibe. Like, I just want to make sure I didn't do anything wrong. And that's, I think, when you notice inside, like, oh, geez, I don't want to treat my friends like that. Like, nobody did anything specific to me. So you get into this cloud, right, of just general frustration and just being short-tempered and just being easily irritated and pushing people away. And so that's kind of something that caught me, Nick, as I heard that was, okay, being irritable, I think, is what I think of when I think of grumpy. Like, I think of how would I clinically describe grumpiness, and it's usually like increased irritability, right, and easily frustrated, or low resistance or resilience. And so I think whenever that's happening, I admire a person's ability to catch it, and then I think the very first thing you do is exactly what this writer's doing, which is self-reflection, and sort of starting with, why am I doing this? Can I do kind of a week-long audit in my mind and ask, is there something that put me into this status that I never switched out of, right? It's like the train track switched over, and I took that exit into Grumpland, and I have not yet come out of it. And I think catching it and then doing that backtracking is the very first thing that I'd want somebody to do.
Right. And I was going to say, too, I applaud you, Kevin, first of all, for being able to recognize it. That's high level of awareness, which is...
We would mark that in a note as good insight. Yeah.
Right. That's what we're always trying to get any of our clients to do is, number one, improve awareness.
Right.
So he's already got that.
Right.
For me, the rest of this boils down to 2 factors. The first one is good self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So everybody has their own methods of self-care. For me, it's part being outdoors, it's part exercise, part eating healthy. That's kind of my good self-care. So if I notice that I'm becoming irritable, those are the first things I look at.
Are you doing those things?
Am I doing those things? And it's almost, it's very consistent that when I'm not doing those things, my mood shifts. Right. And so I always look at self-care first. The second thing I look at is, am I keeping a realistic view of my situation, of reality?
Yes.
And with
that's huge.
With that, I really look at self-talk. What's my internal dialogue? You know, and there's certain key phrases that if I catch myself having, I know something's wrong, which is stuff like, this isn't fair.
Right.
If I ever catch myself doing that, I know something's wrong.
Right.
Or what are some other ones? I don't deserve this, or stuff like that.
Yeah. No, that self-pity, I think, is an important thing. And we talk about this in recovery a lot, right? Because that's one of the challenges we usually encounter with people that are in early addiction recovery is trying to shift their presence of mind from I'm a victim, everybody's against me, or I feel like, you know, I'm not allotted enough in life, to an appreciation, to be thankful. We tell them, start with an attitude of gratitude. And it really reboots everything in their life.
Well, and the reason why it works is because that your internal dialogue is a reflection of how your mind is perceiving situations, right? Like that's what's at the surface. We can identify our thinking patterns, so we know, you know, we all view the world through a filter.
Right.
And that filter is going to determine our outcome, how we're going to react to it. So your internal dialogue is kind of the key to identifying what that filter is.
Yes.
So if I find myself on the opposite end, I'm doing really well.
Right.
When my internal dialogue reflects something to the effect of, okay, this sucks, but put on your big boy pants and let's do this.
Right. I'm going to rise to this.
Right. Like,
yes.
this is a challenge. Or here's another one. If I catch myself having thoughts like, okay, this is my opportunity to prove myself, or this is my opportunity to show the world what I can do.
Yes.
If my thinking is in line with that, I'm doing really good.
So like 99% of the time, whenever we're working with somebody that tells us, yeah, I just noticed lately I'm really irritable, I'm unhappy, and I'm just frustrated, I'm taking it out on other people. If we start probing, we find that, right? We find that mentality. Or we find somebody living rent-free in their head. Remember that? When we catch people, it's like, well, I'm really just frustrated with my mom right now. I'm really frustrated with my wife right now. And, that's the thing. And it's like, you're letting that person stay in your mind. And you're fixating on all the things they're doing wrong. And do you think they're doing that about you right now? Right. Do you think that they're thinking about you while they're having their cup of coffee? No. And so sometimes we have to do that adjustment of perspective of like, what are you fixated on? What are you noticing? What is in front of your eyes as you go through the world? And also, are you allowing yourself to be painted in your own mind as somebody that life is happening to? Or are you happening to the world? Are you bringing yourself forward? And one of the things that we talk about sometimes is that phrase, I have to. Changing that to I get to, right? So I have to go to work today. I have to go to the grocery store. I have to take my kid to karate. I have to do these things. It's frustrating. I feel like I'm not in control of my life. I'm just angry all the time. But if I can pivot to I get those things. I get to go to a job. A lot of people don't have one. I get to drive my car and go fill it up with gas. I get to pay this bill that is, evidence that I have something good in my life. I get to take my kid to karate. I have a kid and they like karate and it's fun for me. That fundamental shift internally is, going back to Kevin's letter, the difference between what he calls adulting, which he just assumes is all grumpiness. It's the difference between living well and living poorly. And I think that we make our own reality. One of your famous slogans, Nick, is you really do not like it when somebody says somebody makes me feel something.
Right.
Yeah, and that's essentially what grumpiness and high irritability is. You're leaving yourself vulnerable to allowing very small effort on other people's part to affect you deeply because you're not putting up that perspective shift of seeing the world in a good way.
Right. Yeah. That has always caused problems in relationships with me, is saying
you make me
challenging the way people say that. But yeah, that is always a kind of a pet peeve of mine, is when I hear somebody say, well, you made me angry.
Right.
Or another favorite of mine is, well, you pushed my buttons.
You pushed my buttons.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, don't leave your buttons out there to be pushed. You're not a puppet on a string. And that's the point that I like to make with things is my emotions are my emotions, right? If I say Jim made me angry, then I'm implying that Jim has control over my emotions.
Yes.
Now, if I do the same with anger, then what does that say about my happiness?
Right.
If he's got control over my anger, then he has control over my happiness. Well, I don't want to live in a world where my happiness is determined by what Jim.
You know what? Give it a shot. Give it a shot. I would take good care of you.
Yeah.
I feel like I can make you a happy man.
If there's anything we learned from this past weekend, is that your decision making is questionable.
It's the Vegemite thing. How long am I going to have to pay for this? I feel like I was already punished in full. But no, I agree with you on that. I think that the only caveat I would add to the listener is, you have to remember sometimes that when we talk, we are speaking firstly as therapists, right? And so when you hear us say something like, gosh, we really get irritated at that phrase, so-and-so makes me such and such, we realize that in American linguistics, that's a phrase that can just be shorthand for I was irritated at something. And that's okay. As therapists, when you say that in session, we're probably going to unpack how you probably need to also see yourself as in control of your life, right? But we also recognize that a situation can provoke in you feelings. We're not asking you to be a robot, but we want you to always be thoughtful about your own ability to adapt to the situation.
It's about, for me, it's about owning the feeling.
Yes, yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. Is own the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because
don't make it somebody else's fault.
Right. Because then when you do that, then it puts you in the driver's seat.
Yes.
And if there's anybody that you want to be in the driver's seat of your life, it should be you.
Right. I agree with that. But I also agree with, and again, I just want to make sure the listener doesn't misunderstand, because some people will hear that and they go, so should I not tell my boyfriend or girlfriend that I'm irritated with them or whatever? In Kevin's case, I'm grumpy at my friends, and there are things that they do that probably do irritate me. Is that all on me? To an extent, I want you to first check yourself, but also I like communication. I like you coming to them and saying, I feel X when you Y. And
right.
it's annoying. Could you stop doing that? And, okay, that's fine. And maybe they'll do it. Maybe they're not. But
right.
Starting with the recognition of self, I think, is the first part. But, Kevin, to your question, how do you deal with grumpiness? Perspective shift, buddy. That's everything you can do, especially whenever you're in a season of life like college or early career and you're interacting with so many variables. You are the only constant in your life. You are the only thing you have control over. And I think that self-examination that you're already doing, auditing your past week and asking yourself, where did I get into this mindset? When did this happen? And then, I also think that one of the best cures that I've ever had, Nick, for grumpiness is making a gratitude journal. And so just pulling out
cupcakes.
Cupcakes, yeah, well, that's it. I mean, cupcakes. That's how you fix it. So, Kevin, cupcakes. And maybe, make a list occasionally of the things you're grateful for in your life.
I'd piggyback on that. I agree with that.
Cupcakes.
Because that is and the
the gratitude journal.
The other one, whatever that
you
was.
You can't frost those.
Because we have to anything that we want to get better at, we have to practice.
Yes.
So if I want to get better at positive thinking, I have to practice it. And it's going to feel unnatural at first.
Yes.
But I think by doing that, it gets you into that habit, helps you change your perspective, and then you start noticing more positive things.
Yeah. But if you start with an attitude of gratitude, nothing defeats grumpiness or irritability like that.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will discuss the struggles of being a stepmom. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Are you an advocate for mental health? Are you looking for more information about mental illness for yourself or a loved one? There is an organization you should look into called the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI for short. NAMI is the nation's largest organization of people living with mental illness, their friends, and family members joining together to provide support groups, information, and to ensure that this issue is respected in politics. If you'd like more information, go to www.nami.org. That's www.nami.org.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next listener writes in about the challenges of being a stepmom. This letter's titled Bonus Mom. I like that. Hi, guys. First off, I'd like to say thank you for having this podcast. It's a great resource for me, and I'm sure many others. It's great for cutting through all the bullcrap therapy advice that can be found in countless web articles that I used to scroll through at 2:30 in the morning. I've been there, and that's why this podcast exists. I'm a stepmom. I didn't realize how tough it would be, though, in my role as a stepmother. Here's what sent me over to the edge recently. Last week, my stepdaughter faked sick and got out of school 2 days in a row. She conned her mother, aunt, and grandmother into believing her. But I saw her both days, and even though she was home, quote, sick, she was FaceTiming her friends and appeared completely fine. I called her out on it and said that she should be going to school. But the third day, her grandmother picked her up and took her to the doctor's office, which made me suddenly regret calling her out and saying she was faking being sick. Part of me was like, oh crap, I messed up. I'm not fit to be a mom ever, and I just wanted to crawl into a hole and die. The other part of me said, you did the same thing your mom would have done. You did what was best at the time. Hours passed after the doctor's visit. Silence. No one calls us or texts us. Finally, my husband finds out what happened. The verdict? The stepdaughter's fine. While I may have taken some slight joy in knowing that I had been accurate in my decisions earlier in the week, it was short-lived. I'm furious. I've never felt so undermined, disrespected by my stepdaughter, her mom, grandmother, my husband's mother, my sister-in-law. I feel like my opinion means dirt. Like I can never be a good enough mom to those kids just because I didn't give birth to them myself. I feel like now more than ever, I have zero authority, zero say. I feel now sometimes like a stranger in my own home. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells every time I'm with my stepdaughter. 1 minute, I want to flip everyone the bird and walk away. But I love these effers. I can't walk away. It's not fair because all of us have built a life with each other as a family. I know that these hormones, these tricks that my stepdaughter play can be temporary, but I'm also afraid that she'll continue to be this type of person if no one sets boundaries. She is literally calling all the shots, and I'm helpless to stop a 14-year-old girl from ruling all our lives. I just want her to be a decent human being. Please help. I'm literally in tears at this point. Anonymous.
Wow. Well, thank you for writing in.
God, I get that. You know, you think you've got it bad, Anonymous. My 3-year-old girl runs my life. I got a 14. Geez, at least a 14-year-old you could talk to him. My 3-year-old's like, I want cookies.
Well, then we got two issues going on simultaneously. There's the struggles with just being the mother of a teenager.
That's by itself. That's hard, no matter
tough.
what.
Then you've got the added challenge of
You're not
being
my
the
mom.
stepmom. Yeah, you've got that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you are the step parent, and then you don't have the full support of the other parents,
the politics, other people who also seem to have the ability to have power. And so this is so common, right? That we see this in children. I mean, you've seen this working with foster care children.
Mm-hmm.
They are amazing at playing adults against each other. I mean, it is baffling. They are so good. If they were ambassadors to like nations, we would all be at war as they like sit on the ashes ruling us all. It's incredible. And in this story, it's so clear that that's happening. And I actually, Nick, just so everybody knows, I summarized the story quite a bit because she had written quite a bit in detail. But essentially, that's what happened is, I mean, she played everybody like a fiddle. She had her dad in on it against the stepmom. She went to her grandmother. She had her aunt in on it, her biological mom, everybody. And this stepmom was the only one who was like, guys, she's clearly not sick. Like, she's coming home from school. She's FaceTiming with her friends. She wants to hang out with them. I got to call this. And then she did, and they didn't believe her, so they took her to the doctor. And then it turns out she's completely fine. And it's like, yay, temporary victory. I'm glad for once to be validated, but this is the pattern of our lives.
Right.
I can never stand up to this girl. And it's frustrating, Nick, because I think if you honestly care about a kid, you do stand up to them. Because, like, that's what she says at the end of the letter. She says, I want her to turn into a good human being.
Right.
But she's not going to be that if we don't have boundaries. And you and I know that's absolutely true.
Yeah, that's 100% true. That's always the biggest challenge working with family members, especially in my line of work, working in addictions.
Yes.
The family plays a huge role in recovery. And if you don't have everybody on the same page, especially with the younger clients. So I used to run an agency that was a substance abuse treatment program for adolescents.
Mm-hmm.
And I would kind of joke with people that, you know, some of my friends and colleagues, that when you are working in that environment, your client isn't the teenager.
Right.
It's the family.
Yeah.
And if you do not have the family on board, it's impossible, because triangulation is a skill learned at a very young age.
You explain that. Explain what that is.
I was going to toss it to you. So triangulation essentially is manipulation. It's when you've got somebody who comes in and kind of disrupts and kind of breaks up the relationship. So I'm going to communicate one message to one person, and I'm going to communicate a different message to a different person.
Now I can get them to feud.
Right, it's the same. It's the classic example.
It's divide and conquer.
Right, and it's the what we all did as teenagers.
Yeah.
Well, go ask your mother.
Ask your mother.
I did. She said yes. And then after you get the yes from dad, then you go to mom.
All right. On behalf of all fathers everywhere, Nick, I just want you to know, I defer to the mom because I'm tired of getting yelled at. Okay, so the kids come to me and go, Dad, can I have this cookie? I don't know. I mean, like, I have no problem with you having cookies, but apparently it's a big deal. So, like, I'm just going to defer, because if I say I think your mom's nuts and I'm cool with you having the whole thing of cookies as long as you share some with me, then I get yelled at, Nick.
Right.
And I don't want to get yelled at.
And that's exactly is my point, because then it all goes back to the relationship between the two of you.
The communication.
Right? So kids can pick up on that at a very young age.
Yes.
They know, they may not be able to verbalize it, but they know that there's a disagreement between mom and dad, and they learn how to wedge themselves into those little situations to be able to manipulate it.
That's absolutely true.
So going back to what I had said earlier, where it seems like we kind of have two problems. The first is just the adolescent,
right, teenager,
but then the other part then, I think before you can deal with that one, you have to address the first one, which is not having all of the responsible parties on the same page.
Yes, you got to have that communication.
Yeah.
And like, obviously that's the biggest upset here. And I don't know all the drama, right? Dad is remarried and remarried to you now, stepmom, bonus mom. And so is there resentment? You know, is biological mom okay with this? And in the letter, she had said that they were okay.
She said that they get along.
So, I mean, that could be there. But here's the thing that's also interesting. When it comes to my child, I go into a different mode, right? So like I have people that I enjoy. They might be my friends. I might collaborate with them. But if they come in and tell, like my son and daughter's grandparents, right? So my in-laws, I really like my in-laws. I really get along with them. But if they tell my kids to go do X, Y, or Z, or give them permission to do something, and I'm not cool with it, I think I'm artful at like how I come in and say no to that. But I am the boss. Like we do not have equal authority in this relationship. I'm it, And so like that's what's challenging, I think, too, is that you have so many parties that seem to have equal authority, and you kind of need to narrow this down to there's 3 humans that have authority over you: dad, biological mom, and stepmom, and that needs to be communicated from biological mom. She needs to say, hey, go ask bonus mom, because you're at her house right now. She is the authority on this. Don't call me from the sideline. But I also get it, Nick, because when your kid's sick, you go into a different mode. It's like, we're not talking about whether or not you can have ice cream after dinner. We're talking about whether or not you're healthy. And so as a parent, I get really panicky about that too. So, but I can see your point. Like, communication is obviously the most foundational piece of this. Trying to get that direct communication to each parent, not talking through the child, but talking to the other. My kids have tried to play my wife and I against us. At this age, they're pretty innocent about it. I think they just do it by accident. Like they don't know, so they're just curious about what the answer is, and they're just trying to find out. But we've made a rule in our family that we will delay an answer, or we will delay getting that conversation finished, and we will stop that until we have collaborated with the other so that we can get on the exact same page.
So what would you say then is your advice to the listener? Because it almost kind of sounds like we have to improve communication. We've got to work on stuff like that. But then on the other hand, it seems like there is a little bit of understanding that's going to have to happen, and basically get to a point where you kind of, I don't want to say, I'm trying to find the right political way to say this, but understanding that as a step parent, this is just going to happen.
Yes.
That there's some level that you're just going to have to come to acceptance.
Right.
That in those situations where the parent or when the child is sick, biological mom has this biological need that it's just going to click, and she's going to want to become an authority figure.
Let me give you some feedback on that, because actually here's one of the situations I've seen that I think was one of the best situations I've ever seen for a family. So right now, it's extremely common that families are blended, right? We live in that world. So that's okay. And I think that can be tremendously helpful for a child. I think having 4 parents can actually be way better than having 2. Like, they just have more humans that love them and want to be kind to them, more resources, more options, more opportunities. Here's one of the most successful models I've ever seen. In my private practice once, I had a family come in, and I'll never forget this day because I was so shocked. I didn't have enough chairs in the room, okay? So this family comes in, biological mom, biological dad, stepmom, stepdad, grandparents from one side, grandparents from the other side. I had like 6 people, and then 1 teenager. And this teenager sitting in the middle of this couch, surrounded by all these people. And I'm like, what are we here for today? And they were like, we as the parents, we as the team of guardians that love this kid, we need help because this communication thing is hard. And because of their lifestyle, the kid ended up kind of being in all of their homes at some point, orbits. And it was problematic. So they said, we came to an agreement as a family that we are going to elect you to be the expert. You're going to be the one who, if we have a disagreement, you're going to be the guy that we pull off to the sidelines, and you're going to referee our disagreement and help us do what's best for the kid first. Kid first policy in our house. Not going to be one person's morals, one person's views, kid first policy. And you're going to be his advocate and tell us what would be best hypothetically for the kid. That was such a powerful dynamic to have. I got to know each member of the family, got to know the kid really well. And then they wouldn't come in weekly. It was just every once in a while they would reach an impasse like this doctor situation. And they would say, hey, that's why Jim's in our life, is because that was an area we didn't handle very cleanly. Why don't we go ahead and make an appointment for him next week? We'll come back together. We'll find out what went wrong. He'll coach us on how we could have done that better in the future. We'll establish a new rule. But that was very powerful because here I was, completely external. I don't care. I don't care if your kid does X, Y, or Z. I don't care if they go to prom. I don't care if you punish them. I have no emotional investment investment in any of this. I can just tell you from the outside looking in what is best for a human, especially a teenager, to have structure, to have boundaries, and how I can counsel everybody. Like the stepmom in this letter, Nick, said, boundaries. I want this kid to have boundaries or she's going to end up being a terror. Right. And if we let her slip through the cracks because we're all fighting each other, then she's going to become a horrible human being. And so that would be one piece of advice. If you can't get on the same page in a good benevolent spirit where everybody's really proactively trying to seek counsel with each other, bringing in a third party where you bring in a therapist and you say, hey, you're going to be our touchstone. You've met all of us. You have a good ground base of what this kid's about, what our family's about. And from time to time, we're going to come in here as a family and get all on the same page. That's something where you can have a real scheduled appointment and a place and time to actually discuss this stuff and to go over some nuances too. And it usually stops the kid from working everybody against each other because now we have a center point, right? We've defeated the triangle. We've broken the triangle. We've made it a circle. And so now everybody's coming together around one unified human who technically works for everybody and doesn't have a side in any of this. Their job is to say, from the outside looking in, what's best for the kid. So that might be one more thing, bonus mom, that you could bring to this. But as a parent, I can tell you, it's really hard. I get this. You are legitimately a parent. You're trying to do your best. As somebody who has worked with teenagers, I can tell you, they are a nightmare. They're really difficult to work with. And then it's a blended family. And it's a blended family where you don't necessarily have a fair share of the power. And that's always a problem because it's a divided framework, right? It just never works out. Yep. But I mean, not to say it doesn't work out, it can't work out, but it's to say it can't work out without intervention. And, you know, you're saying as you write this letter that you feel like you're in tears. I would recommend that maybe you bring that up to the whole family of, hey, guys, can we as a family meet with a therapist once just to kind of get some pointers on how we can collaborate so these kids are raised well? And most people will say, yeah, sure, that sounds like a great idea. That doesn't scare them. But a therapist will usually come in and address that issue of non-communication.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. Thank you for writing in.
Thank you.
Keep giving us updates.
Yeah, I'd love to get feedback.
I'd love to follow up on this and see what happens. Okay. Our next one comes to us from Ice Blue Scoop. She keeps it short and sweet. Howdy, serious question here. Do either of you believe you can make yourself mentally tough to manage stress, past trauma, peer pressure, day-to-day struggles? And are you born with stronger are people born with stronger coping skills?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because it's really two questions, right? Because it's funny because when we were at Scoop Fest, we met some of our fans, and some of them are actually like psychology students, which I loved. I was like, because they had a whole different part of the conversation about our show. It's like, I love some of the questions you guys get because I'm reading about that in my textbook right now, and so it's really fun. This question, Nick, is the first half is nurture such a thing? And the second half is nature such a thing? Which are psychological terms that we use to say, the first half, can a person change their outcomes? And the second piece is, are people born with strengths and weaknesses that ultimately predispose them to things?
The answer is yes.
To take it. To Ice Blue Scoop.
To both. Yeah, because we do know from, what we know about like post-traumatic stress disorder, where two people can be in the exact same situation, witness the exact same thing. One of them will come out with PTSD and the other will not.
That's right.
And we do know that part of that has to do with family, with the way that they were raised, how resiliency was part of their upbringing.
Yes.
Also has to do with just their stress response.
Yes.
So there's no predictive nature. Like we can't really say who's going to respond in what way, but there is a little bit of a difference in how coping skills. Some people, it seems, may just be born with a higher stress response.
I think that's why a lot of times you'll hear us talk about being the best version of yourself, because you are born with strengths, weaknesses, like the little fader dials on your system are at different levels than the guy next to you. And I just want you to rise to a level of resiliency for you. That would be good. Right.
And I would also agree with the first part. Can you make yourself mentally tough to manage stress? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in this book that I was reading,
I talked about
Navy
it last
SEAL
time.
one. Yeah. Resilience.
So this is actually a good point for us to let everybody know that if you're a Patreon Here in November, we are going to launch our official Pod Therapy book club, where we are going to select a book that has to do with self-help and psychology, and we're going to assign chapters and read them and discuss them on Patreon. So it's going to be this fun little bonus thing. But anyway, little plug for this future project we've been working on for a while. So what about this book that you read?
He uses the example of the Stockdale paradox. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, yeah, Stock and Dale, the Chip and Dale.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a little bit different.
Okay.
So James Stockdale was a pilot in Vietnam, and he was shot down in 1965. I'll make it quick.
No, you're
We're
good.
running out of time.
No.
But he was shot down in 1965. He was a POW for 7.5 years. And what he realized in 7.5 years of being tortured on a daily basis, he never gave up a single government secret.
Wow.
Never. But what he did, too, was that he was very observant of other people, other POWs, and he noticed a pattern in how they would break down.
Yes.
And the ones that would break down first were the ones that were lying to themselves about their situation.
Right.
The ones who were foolishly optimistic and thinking like that, okay, this is all going to be over soon and everything's going to be okay.
Right.
Those were the first ones to break down. So the paradox comes into play where it's two competing ideas that you have to somehow manage. And those two competing ideas is, number one, you have to be realistic about your current situation. You can't lie to yourself. But on the other hand, you have to be able to maintain hope and faith that you will win in the end.
Yes.
That you will become triumphant in the end of it. So balancing those two ideas. And so it's kind of this idea of he would kind of talk to himself and realize like, okay, I'm going to be tortured today. They may break my leg today.
Right.
That's reality. That's going to happen. But in the end, I'm going to be victorious. Right. And it's that constant balance.
Yes. And so, that's one path toward mental resiliency, to building that strength. So Ice Blue, it's absolutely possible to do that. And not only is it possible, it is likely, it is usually the outcome that self-examination and self-work leads to mental resiliency and mental toughness and greater adaptability. This is why we're very comfortable with people coming to see a therapist, even if they're not currently in crisis. And usually when I've had folks like that, I'll say, hey, so what are we doing here? And they'll say, we're kind of life coaching, right? I just want to continue to upgrade myself because I never know what's going to be in the future. And this is a good place for self-examination and improvement. Yes.
And I think everybody kind of has to find their own way of doing this. Like I've got techniques that I use myself for building resiliency, but I can't say that they're going to be useful.
They're going to work for everybody.
Right. So one of the things that I do is I kind of mentioned this early on in the first letter, but I kind of try to remind myself or try to look at things from the perspective of when I come out of this at the end, what will I have gained? Right. So if I'm going through a really difficult time, I try to remind myself, or I try to think of things like, okay, when I successfully accomplish this,
so you anticipate victory.
Yes, I anticipate victory, but then I also look at we grow through struggle.
Yes.
Right. By overcoming challenges, that's how we grow. So I try to look at everything as being a challenge and the source of my growth, as opposed to being an obstacle or something that's going to beat me down.
There is no question in my mind that the most valuable thing, the most valuable element to any person becoming mentally tough or increasing their resiliency is perspective. There is no question in my mind that that's what it is. And even if you look at the special forces and you look at like how they train for things, that is all they're doing. Like as much as they're building their bodies, they're working on mental toughness. And they actually, this is true, we've seen this in the research, special forces who have seen the scariest things and have been into the most dangerous situations that are most unwinnable and most high risk, they tend to have a resiliency to PTSD and to trauma. And in part, that resiliency is developed because they have thought through so much and done so much self-work and training to be mentally adaptable to whatever happens, that they are sort of anticipating it and greeting it on its terms. And that's very, very powerful stuff. So, Ice Blue, this is absolutely something that can happen. It is also true that we show up to the game front-loaded with our own abilities, but that we can change or become the best version of ourselves. And Nick's point is also still relevant, that the same strategy doesn't work for everybody. That's why there are so many approaches in psychotherapy, so many different kinds of therapists, so many good books. And I just think, a general approach always yields results. As long as you are trying, you will notice improvement in a person, and they will increase in their strength.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for writing in.
Thank you for writing in. We are at the part of the show where we dive into our apologies and recognize our Patreons and read our reviews. So we only have a couple of apologies this week, Nick. At least I do. I don't know if you have brought any. Yeah, I have some apologies.
I'm good.
Dear Arkansas, I'm sorry that I threatened to ship washed-up Las Vegas Strip entertainers Donnie and Marie to Little Rock as revenge for you sending spent nuclear waste to Nevada. Dear Donnie and Marie.
Washed up?
Dear Donnie and
never
Marie,
mind. Okay.
I'm sorry that I called you washed-up strip entertainers and compared you to nuclear waste.
Harsh.
I apologized for it, Nick. Dear Shay from Utah, happy birthday! And I'm sorry that our Twitter feud continues to be unresolved. I'm also sorry that people from Utah eat twice the national average of lime green Jell-O, the least embarrassing fact about Utah that I found on the internet.
And we want to thank all of our new TheraPals, Tess Miller and Scoopstronaut. Thank you very much. We want to thank our THERAPODs, the dapper three-toed reptilian Patreons, and especially our newest THERAPOD, Kate Keller.
Kate Keller!
As well as the rest of the THERAPODs, Corey Owens, John Blankenship, Lori Ellsroth, Linda Brandmeier, Mandy Abela. and Manu Muzakayo.
Oh! This is a great opportunity for me to read to play her video.
And
okay.
While you're pulling that up, of course, we want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the Theraproducers. Thank you, David Villavon. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't know. Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. Jake Schneider, Kayla Lansbury, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, and Smitty.
Smitty Scoop. I love all of you guys. And what's so cool is we now have 5 of our 8 open positions for Theraproducers. The Elite 8, the Illuminati, the secretive society that secretly is the New World Order that runs Pod Therapy. We have 5 of those 8, so that is so awesome. We almost have a full squad. So exciting. And remember, Theraproducers, I actually sent you a message through Patreon. You guys all get to bring us messages if you would like to play during the ad breaks, and that can be a recording of you, or you can have us read something. So double check on that, because you can be doing that. And so here's my recording of Manu. Hold on.
Apparently Google screwed up my name when I sent you the link. I don't know why. It changed the accent.
Oh, that was her first video.
Well, that wasn't helpful.
That was not helpful. All right, this is the one, I think.
So I'm doing what I should have done from the start. It's just saying my name. It's Manuela Musacchio.
Manuela Musacchio.
Okay.
Manuela Musacchio.
We will practice that.
I'm so glad she sent me that video. Thank you, Manu.
If you would like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy things like our book club and discussion groups, go to www.patreon.com/therapy and join the party.
Yep, and we do not have any new reviews to read this week, but I'm sure all the listeners who are listening to this are going to jump onto iTunes and write reviews for us and give us 5 stars, or on Facebook, so that we can read what they write about us and thank them on air for their review. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast,
Thank you.
And thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, Pod Therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and now on patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I am Manuela Musacchio.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.